So we're continuing with the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, which is a very extensive, long chapter. And contains some of the essence of what the Bhagavad Gita is all about. A big part of what Krishna was talking about in the chapters before the 18th chapter was about the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. In other words, the level of consciousness that goes into everything we do. And if you'd say, well, what's the main difference between a person who is awake or enlightened or people say, I want to be a better human being, but what does that mean? So the way you understand it through the ancient Vedic texts like the Gita is that it's about consciousness. Consciousness is either elevated or degraded, right? There's different kinds of consciousness, which Krishna refers to here as the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So to give you some examples of what those are, he goes over different areas of our life in which those states of consciousness are exhibited. And it's important to check because we might go through one or more or all of these in the course of a day even. It's not that we are necessarily locked into one thing, but as you evolve, you will find yourself more and more and more in a particular state of consciousness. And that is how you know that you're growing. One of the things I find that it happens in today's modern day spirituality is because it's kind of a hodgepodge of science and of ancient texts from different parts of the world, and because it taps into psychology and it taps into self-help and it taps into everything else around us, there is no clear indicator of what is spiritual progress. People say, oh, I'm spiritual. Really? What does that mean? And what does that mean? How do you know when you're spiritual and how do you know when you're not? What are the indicators? What are the signs? Or are you just following another belief system? Unlike belief systems of religion, the Gita and the Vedic teachers and gurus attempted to create something that was scientific, meaning measurable, meaning something quantifiable. Now, I don't mean it was quantifiable by scales and machines, but rather quantifiable in the level of consciousness and the person's thoughts and actions and so on, so by which you could measure for yourself. You were the measuring apparatus in which you could actually see and know where you're at. It's not about someone else knowing where you're at. Maybe to some degree people can see where you're at, but for the most important part was for you to know where you're at. So I'll start off with some of this part here where he's talking about the different kinds of consciousness, the mode of passion, the mode of goodness, the mode of ignorance. And let's start to understand that a little better. The mode of goodness is known as sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A, sattva or sat. You might have heard of sattvic diet. So that's a kind of diet that is known to be very clean and very cleansing for the body and very healthy for the body. Similarly, there are other kinds of foods that are rajasic and that are tamasic, but I think we've talked about that earlier, so I'll skip that conversation for now. Right now he's talking about work. We read a little bit of this last time, so I'm kind of a slight overlap, but I think you'll see where it's going. It's better for you to see where it's going altogether. So he says here, as for actions, the action that is in accordance with duty, which is performed without attachment, without love or hate, by one who has renounced the results or the fruits of their actions, is called action in the mode of goodness. So when you do something, not because you hate it, not because you love it, not because you are, but mainly because that's just what you do. This is you. You're being you. This is your natural self. So what Krishna is getting at is when he talks about duty, right? In especially here when he talks about prescribed duty, he's referring to your original quality, your aptitude and your actions, right? Guna karma vibhagasa. He says this system that he's created of the different kinds of people. There were four stages of life: brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas, which were meant to be age 0 to 25, you were a student. Then 25 to 50, you were a householder, taking care of family and so on. And then 50 to 75, you kind of started stepping away. Your kids were grown up and you started stepping away, starting to practice detachment, renunciation, going to spiritual places, spending more time in your spiritual path. And then 75 to 100, you become completely devoted to that path and step away from all your worldly obligations. So that's kind of like the divisions in terms of the social order. And then, well, no, in terms of where you're at in life. But in the social order, it was you are a Brahmin or a priest, you're a wise person, someone, engaging in spiritual practices and teaching them to others. Or you're a Kshatriya warrior or administrator or a ruler, or you're a Vaishya, which is a business person, involved as an entrepreneur or in business or something of that nature, or a Shudra or a laborer, a worker, involved in more menial tasks. So those are the different kinds of aptitude and qualities when they broke it up in short. It became corrupted as the caste system in India based on birth, but it was never meant to be that. It was based upon a person's guna and karma, their qualities or aptitude and their actions. So when you act in accordance with your nature, with your true self, when you act in accordance with what is natural for you, and when you do it without attachment, without love or hate, and by renouncing the fruits of your actions, that, he says, is action in the mode of goodness. I'll give you my own example here, if that helps. I became a monk at the age of 20, a brahmachari, and lived in an ashram for many years and did not, well, I learned a lot. I learned a lot in that process. When I came out of there, I was kind of confused about what my duty is, so I became an entrepreneur. I had not, gone and completed all the college stuff, so I thought, well, being an entrepreneur would be what's best for me. It took me till my mid-40s to find my true occupation, the thing that I had been doing most naturally since I was a kid. I was doing it since I was 13. It was so natural and normal to be helping people with their issues, to be listening to them, to helping them find a way, that I never thought that being a therapist or a counselor was anything of a profession. So I that's not. My friends pointed out to me, that's what you're doing most of the time. You're spending time with people, talking to them about their stuff, about their issues and how to help them out with that. And maybe there's something you should do about it. Maybe that's where your actual work is. It was only in my mid-40s that I actually got the point and started doing that. So I want to ask you the question today. Are you doing the very thing that you were designed to do? Because my design was a certain way. It was there since I was 13. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't looking at who I am. I was just looking at, well, what's practical? What needs to be done? How do you pay the bills? That kind of thing. But yes, it's a question for you. Are you really following your true nature, your aptitude, the thing that you were designed, the gifts you were given, that come most naturally to you, which seem to be almost like, nah, not a big deal, but everyone else thinks they are? And if so, I'd like you to really stop and look at yourself again and understand what those qualities are and what those gifts are that you were literally born with, which come most naturally to you. Are you a creative person? Are you a warrior? Are you an intellectual? Are you what is your true nature? Because when you step into it, then you do it because of the love of that. Like, it's not because you're making a ton of money and therefore you're going to do it, or it's not because everyone's going to like you and therefore you're going to do it. You're going to do it because that's who you are and that's what you do. See the difference? It's not that, of course, you need to be able to survive doing what you do, but you need to be able to make a living at it, of course. But the point being that you do it more because it's like a fish in water, right? It swims. It's its nature. It's natural for the fish to swim in water, right? It doesn't jog. It doesn't run. It doesn't fly. It swims. and bird flies. That's what it does. Dogs bark and cats meow. So, if you have any thoughts on that for a moment, and you've been on a certain, you haven't really looked at that, if you're getting an aha moment out here and you want to share something, just let me know. Raise your hand and I'll be glad to have you do that briefly. So he says that action performed in accordance with duty, which is performed without attachment, without love or hate, and by renouncing the results to action, is called action in the mode of goodness. The action performed with great effort and by seeking to gratify one's desires, and which is enacted from a sense of false ego, is called action in the mode of passion. False ego, he means here, where it's about self-aggrandizement. You're trying to prove something, you're trying to be something, you're trying to impress people, right? That's that false self, the false egoic self. If it's coming out of that, right, that you want to prove your worth, your value by making a ton of money, or by having a flashy lifestyle, or by wearing designer clothes, or whatever else it might be, that's coming from false ego. So he's saying action performed with great effort by one seeking to gratify his desires, and which is enacted from a sense of false ego, is called action in the mode of passion, or rajagun. Raja, R-A-J-A, G-U-N-A, gun. So, hold on. Let me mute you here. Okay. Hi. Any questions? Any thoughts? If you feel like sharing, feel free to go in the text, or feel free to raise your hand, and I'll get you online so you can talk about it. All right, next. And that action which is performed in ignorance and delusion, without consideration of future bondage or consequences, which inflicts injury and is impractical, is said to be action in the mode of ignorance. So in other words, action which is there to hurt others, which is performed in ignorance and delusion, ignorance of your true self and delusion about what is best for yourself and all others concerned. Without consideration of the future. Like right now, I just want to do this. I don't care what happens. I'm going to steal a bank. I'm going to go rob a bank, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get quick results. And I don't care if I go to jail or whatever happens. Okay, action in the mode of ignorance, which inflicts injury and is impractical, is said to be action in the mode of ignorance. The person who is free from all material attachments and false ego, is enthusiastic and resolute, who is indifferent to success or failure, is a person in the mode of goodness. So are you getting the idea now? Free from material attachments, material means attachments to whether you make a ton of money doing what you do, or whether you make a little doing what you do. It's not about trying to impress anyone. It's just following your true self, right? And being enthusiastic in that and resolute in that, and being indifferent to success or failure. These are such important qualities, because in today's time we find that people give up very easily. They'll take on a task and they don't have what's called frustration tolerance, or they don't have the ability to be able to persevere on a certain path and really perfect and hone in their skills, or to really get good at something. It's about being a jack of all trades, but a master of none. This is about what he's talking about, is really mastering the path of what you're on, the art of what you do. But that worker who is attached to the fruits of his labor, and who is passionately wants to enjoy them, who is greedy, envious, and impure, and moved by happiness and distress, is a worker in the mode of passion. I encourage you to reflect on these words. I encourage you to think about them, see where you stand, and if you'd like to share, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you as well. Right? So it's not that we should not want to enjoy the fruits of our labor. Please do not be black and white about this. But if this is all that drives you, right, is I need to enjoy, and that enjoyment is the goal of my life. I've heard people say this. I said the goal of life is to enjoy myself, is to have a good time, is to have fun. No, that is not the goal of your life. Right? If that is all you think life is about, is having fun, if that's what you think relationships are about, if that's what you think work is about, then you're going to be disappointed, because everything has its ups and downs. Yeah? If you're going to be driven by happiness and distress, well, this doesn't make me happy, and I'm miserable being here. There are some things that, there are some things that truly aren't worth pursuing, because they are either a dead end or they're not your thing. But if you are on your path and you are meeting with obstacles, it is important that you learn how to navigate that, and not just walk away from something that is because it's a little tough or a little hard to do. I'm sure it goes situation to situation, and one has to look at that. But he's talking of an overall state of consciousness in which it is about what used to be referred to as, what was that? Like, just to eat, drink, and be merry, right? What was that? There was a Roman, the Romans had a term for that. Epicurean was, of course, around food. There was another term for hedonistic. Yes, if that is what you think life is about, is a hedonistic pursuit, that it's all about finding that which makes you feel good, or as they used to say back in the hippie days, if it feels good, do it, right? 60s, that was a very driving principle. If it feels good, do it. Not really. The things that to actually achieve anything in life, it doesn't necessarily feel good. It's not always something that is simple and easy and effortless and feels good. Sometimes it's effort, sometimes it's work, sometimes you got to persevere, sometimes you got to really push through some challenges and obstacles to get where you want to get. Any questions? Any thoughts? Anybody? And that person who is always engaged in work against the injunctions of the scripture, that who is materialistic, obstinate, cheating, and expert in insulting others, who is lazy and always morose and procrastinating, is a worker in the mode of ignorance. So you might come across people like this, and I think there's a lot of them out there that we come across who are obstinate. They'll cheat about, it can be small cheating about, whether you've done a certain task or not, whether you're not taking responsibility for what you need to do and blaming on others. Expert insulting others, lazy, morose, procrastinating. These are the qualities of a person in the mode of ignorance. If you find yourself there, you may want to look at, how do I shift my state of consciousness? And Krishna is going to tell you more about how you actually elevate your consciousness. We'll talk more about that. Consciousness is some product of everything you do in life, not just your work. The work is just where it starts to show up. But it's a sum product of your entire thinking about life. It comes down to the food you eat, the habits you have, the time you wake up. Everything is connected to your level of consciousness. And it's important to evaluate not just the outcome, not just the output, but also the input. What are you putting into your brain? What are you consuming in your life in terms of the shows you watch, the books you read, the music you listen to? And how clear-headed is your mind? All of that, it impacts the output. So the input impacts the output. O Dhananjay, winner of wealth, please listen as I tell you in detail of the three kinds of understanding and determination according to the three modes of nature. That understanding by which one knows what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, what is to be feared and what is not to be feared, what is binding and what is liberating, that understanding is established in the mode of goodness. It's really important to understand this, because how do you know what ought to be done, what ought not to be done? How do you know what is right and what is wrong? What is the method you use? Do you go by scripture? Do you go by society? Do you go by books you've read? How do you know? There are those who follow moral ethics and religious doctrine, but that keeps changing, has been changing from time to time. In some places, people are very fanatical about their religious doctrine, and others disagree with that. Social norms keep changing. How do you know what is right action? How do you know what should be done, what should not be done? And how do you do it according to time, place, and circumstance? Because you cannot generalize these things. You cannot say that there is a one-size formula that fits for all time, for all people, for all places. It doesn't work like that. There are many situations in which you've got to look at things from a different perspective, because it's a different condition, it's a different place, it's a different time. What was applicable back 200 years ago and what is applicable now will be very different. Right? Whether you look at dress, you look at social norms, you look at cultural values, so much has changed, so very much has changed. And if you go from one country to another, again, there is so much of difference. You start telling, there's a whole controversy going on right now about they're trying to tell Muslim girls not to wear their hijab when they come into college in India. This is ridiculous. That is their cultural norm. It is their religious norm. I'm not telling them what to do and what they shouldn't do. But what is true for one person is false for another. What is right for one might be wrong for another. You have to be able to view that. So how do you know what ought to be done and what ought not to be done? A lot of those kind of controversies are politically driven. They're driven by people wanting to create chaos so that they can have their political party come up ahead and win or make a ruckus or make a noise or make a scene so that they'll be recognized as some kind of great person. But in fact, in your life, when you face situations and you need to know what should be done, what should not be done, should I take up this argument or this battle or this issue, or should I not take it up? And there's a very simple formula. There is a very simple way to do this. And that is, to me, it comes down to a very simple thing. Vibha says very beautifully, listen to your conscience. Absolutely. And Vibha, how do you do that? How do you do that? Would you like to come on and share?
Yeah, sure. So it's really an interesting subject about how do you do it, given the factor of time and place where you are. So I don't live in India. I haven't lived in India for 37 years, and I live here. But a part of me, deep down inside, are still the Indian roots that I follow. So in my social interactions, not that I have to say it, but there's a part of me inside that I know what is right from wrong in my own conscience.
But Vibha, the question will always come up, is that driven by social norms? Is it driven by religious teachings? Or is it driven by a true understanding of your conscience? Conscience being that voice within us which can guide us in what ought to be done and what ought not to be done.
Yeah.
See?
True.
That voice
Yeah.
is something many people refer to, but they don't know how to discern between it. I'm not saying this about you, I'm saying this about all the people who use that terminology. Do not know how to discern between what is conditioned, what is egoically driven, and what is truly the conscience, that little voice. Often the conscience or that voice within us is very gentle, it's very soft, it's the first thing that comes up and which we are in the habit of ignoring. Most of us, I'm not speaking about anyone here in particular, but most of us tend to ignore that voice. We tend to listen to the louder voice of our mind. And if you will pay attention to the first thing that comes up, pay attention to it, give it some regard, you'll find that usually the first thought that comes up will be a soft, gentle voice, will be of a much greater wisdom and clarity than the louder voices of reaction and of I'll show you what, I'll show him, I'll show this person, and I'll make this point, and I'll tell them,
Yeah.
and how dare they, and what have you, right?
Yeah.
Those are voices of the ego.
Yeah, that's where I say listen to your conscious. Basically, in a very common layman's term, you could say listen to your gut feeling. Listen to your gut feeling. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not
that's more
looking.
likely. You're listening to your body, and that's a good indicator. That's an excellent indicator. So yes, definitely, either listen to your gut feeling or listen to your body. That's usually a very good indicator. Quiet your mind. Quiet your mind, and the answers will come very clearly. I usually will take my issues and go for a walk. When I got something to really sort out, I want to clear my head out. I want to be able to, just breathe in some fresh air, look, have a different perspective on it, and I'll come back, even if it's a 10-minute walk, I'll come back with much greater clarity on what needs to be done. So each of you, I encourage you to find what is true for you, and how do you go about finding that which is the best course of action to take. Craig is sharing yam and niyam. Craig, do you want to come on and explain that? I know it's a very intricate topic, so if you could give us a brief understanding of yam and niyam.
I'm still at the point now where it's not totally memorized at this point, but things that comes up for me often is just the idea of ahimsa. I think that's the one I pull out of it, which like this idea of non-harming, but it's like looking into what that means and studying that is sort of allows me to live into that space, like become present to what that means. It's like, don't harm others around me, the way I speak, with the way I act, and then just upon myself, like how do I think, how do I talk? So I guess it goes back to your when you're asking how do you choose these things, like a part of it is scripture for me, because when I read these and I become with it and I let it sink deep, it's truly just, I don't even know the words, like remarkable, and just like the feeling of just being able to understand that and then live that way is kind of ultimate. It's almost like being in the present, being with living that way, and then it just feels like it's the ultimate.
Craig, you're putting something across that is very powerful, because what you're saying is there is a way of living that is the ultimate, but not because someone says so, but because indeed it works. That there is a wisdom behind. So a lot of times people want to rebel against teachings that might be there in a particular scripture or other. But there is a wisdom behind that which, if understood and its essence taken and adapted to the times that you live in, makes life so much easier. The whole point, at least of the Vedas, was they were meant to be instruction manuals for human existence. They were meant to help us, guide us, so that we could live life in a way that would be in harmony with each other, with nature, and with God. Right? So if you keep that in mind, that is the intent. Now, if you're going to take the teachings and you're going to turn them into disharmony against yourself or against each other or the planet or God, then you've missed the point. Right? If you take those teachings and you now use them as a way to control, manipulate, and harm others, you have absolutely missed the point. The point was to create dharma. Dharma is, in fact, one of the symptoms by which you recognize it is harmony. People are getting along, that they care for each other, they support each other, they love each other. That is just one of the symptoms of dharma. But essentially it is driven by this idea of doing that which is in the best interest of all concerned. Right? What is that which is in the best interest of all concerned, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. So, I like what Vibha is saying in the chat. She's saying truth is our root because it is our isness. So isness refers to the term of our essence or our soul, our true nature. So that truth which derives from our essence, from our soul, would be considered the highest truth. The highest truth derives not from our head, not from our conditioning, not from even our idea of niyam, which is actually more about rules and regulations of how life should be lived, but it arises from our true self. We have to give room for that self to be heard. We have to give room for that inner essence or that core, that soul, to be able to hear what your soul has to say, to hear what the voice that even so Paramatma is within all of us. God is present within every one of us and is wanting to guide us. But we're not listening. And if we would pause and if we would listen to that voice of wisdom within us, we would never end up doing something to harm anyone or never do anything to hurt either ourselves or others. It's important to know that it's not just about hurting others, it's also about hurting yourself. That's equally important. And I don't mean self-interest over the interest of others. I mean not harming either yourself or others. Right? So that means it can be as simple as, the practice of that can be as simple as not judging yourself or others, not thinking ill of yourself or others. Right? So as you practice that, you become more compassionate, more kind, more understanding, more empathetic, and you're able to now resonate with others. But if you are mean and harsh on yourself, some people manage to get away with being really mean and harsh on themselves and be kind and compassionate with others. But I have a feeling that deep down it doesn't work. Deep down there's a resentment because they're being hard on themselves and being soft and kind on others. Some resentment develops. The way it really works, the way I at least practiced is because I've realized that I didn't like being judged, I didn't like being criticized. So I practiced not being hard on myself or on others, not judging myself or others. It doesn't mean you don't get irritated sometimes. It doesn't mean you don't get your instinctive reaction about how things should be doesn't happen. Of course it happens. It happens to me as well. But I know to rein it in. That's not how we do it. In mind, that's how I tell myself. No, each person has their own way, and if they've chosen to do it a certain way, I want to know what that is and why it is. I want to be able to hold space for their reality along with my own. It's not about just holding space for my reality and making the world bend to what I think they should do. No, that's giving too much power to the ego. That is giving too much power to your mind, because your mind is trying to tell you what you should do and trying to tell others what they should do. That is being controlling, and being controlling is arising from the mode of passion and perhaps even of ignorance. Let's take a look at that, what that's about. And that understanding which cannot distinguish between the dharmic way of life and adharma and dharma. They use the word religious and irreligious here, but I think that becomes a little vague. The more intrinsically driven way of life, that to me is dharma. What is action and what between action that should be done and action that should not be done, the imperfect understanding, that imperfect understanding is in the mode of passion. So what should and should not be done, if derived from the ego, will inevitably lead to a form of control. You should do this, or you shouldn't do that, or this is right and this is wrong. It will lead to judgment. If it arises from that kind of judgment and of control and of trying to dominate or trying to dictate to yourself or others, then you will find that is in the mode of passion. And the results of that will often not be beneficial for you or the other. Even if you try to drive yourself to do something from a place of I should not do this, it will lead to guilt, it will lead to fear. And you will find yourself having a very difficult time doing that which should be done, or not doing that which should not be done. Because you are trying to guilt yourself there, you are trying to impose it, you are trying to control it. But if you come from a moment of silence, of stillness, of clarity, there is no need to impose. It clearly just happens. You will do it. You will have this moment where you say, I'm not going to eat any meat anymore. That's it. It's done. That's it. That was it. For me, that's how it happened. I was all of 20 years old. I'd heard all the arguments, I'd heard all the reasons, and then I was like, could there be any truth to this whole thing that they're talking about? Because I grew up eating meat. And when I heard all the reasons and argued about them and then eventually just paused to reflect on them and contemplate, it became very clear. The clarity comes within a moment. The arguments might take weeks and days and hours, but the clarity comes within a moment of what needs to be done. What is the right course of action? And within a moment, there was that turning point. No more. This is it. And from then I didn't look back. There was no more eating of meat or any of that. So I ask you also to reflect on these things. What should be done, what should not be done, but not from your head. Because if you ask your head, oh, I've been eating meat all my life, should I, shouldn't I? Your mind will give you 10,000 reasons. Oh, you know what, it's my blood type. Oh, it's my this or that or the other. And the result of that will be that you will never land up in what is truly best for you. Silence is your greatest teacher. It is what awakens the inner wisdom. It is what awakens that conscience or that voice of God or that part of clarity within yourself. Vibha writes here, reasoning, arguments and such often lead to a rajasic and tamasic lifestyle, at least to my understanding. Yeah, I agree. Our reasoning and our arguing are often highly flawed. Highly flawed. Our mind is not the best instrument for knowing what should be done and what should not be done, regardless of how clever it is at spinning the argument and convincing us or convincing others. You could convince the entire world. I don't care. But your mind is not the best knower of what should and should not be done. It is that inner voice in you that will tell you. And if you've not been listening to it, I encourage you, take time out, because otherwise you will be spinning your wheels, doing things that are actually not in your best interest or in the interest of those around you. Take time. It's the most important thing you will do. And then Krishna continues here, that understanding which considers irreligion to be religion, adharma to be dharma, and dharma to be adharma. So that it considers irreligion to be religion and religion to be irreligion, under the spell of illusion and darkness, maya, and strives always in the wrong direction, is in the mode of ignorance. And you know how that comes about, where you do not know right from wrong, you do not know what is to be done, what is not to be done. It comes from that you're under the spell of Maya or of illusion. You're under the spell of a darkness that takes over your consciousness. You are no longer being you. You are being driven by a darkness that has consumed your wisdom, that you no longer can see clearly. So now, from that place, you will easily seek to hurt others. You will easily seek to take from others. You often look at people who do stuff like that, whether that is a psychopathic killer or whether that is someone who has been ripping off people by taking the money from innocent people, or average folks, and ripping them off with some Ponzi scheme or whatever else. And you wonder, how could this person do this? Like, really? Or someone who's been cheating their partner and they've, lied and cheated and whatever. how could this person do this? I mean, like, where are they coming from? And you often wonder about stuff like that, and it's hard to conceive, because you know that a person who is in their right mind wouldn't be doing that. They would not be wanting to hurt others. They would not be wanting to exploit or damage or create harm. As Craig was saying, you want to do no harm, right? So that's a wonderful way to live your life. Not to harm the animals, not to harm another human being, not to harm yourself. But why is it that some people don't see that? It's because there is a spell of illusion, a darkness that comes over them, that blocks their vision, that blocks their ability to think clearly. So if ever you have that happen, and it can happen to any of us, it can happen any time. If ever that happens, go into a place of meditation, go into a place of prayer, go into a place of surrender, and allow it to lift. And you will feel literally like a dark cloud lifting up from you. And then there will be clarity. Just as in the darkness you cannot see whether there is a table there or a chair, you keep stumbling over things and falling over stuff and hurting yourself. In much the same way, when that kind of darkness descends upon you and you are acting in the mode of ignorance, you will find yourself not knowing where you're walking, no matter what and what you're falling into and why you're getting so hurt and bruised and all of that. But when there is light, there is clarity, and you can see things as they are, and you can see what's where and what to avoid and what is the right way to walk. So you're not bumping into stuff. Right? So metaphorically and literally, this works. There needs to be light. And if you are not experiencing that light in your life, take time to awaken it. Take time to align with it. Take time to experience it. You say, how is that done? It's a simple task. It's not complicated. It's about silence, silencing your mind. It's not silence outside, it's silence inside. Then you can hear the sound of your inner wisdom. Right? There is the Nad Brahma, the sound that arises from the silence. I remember a song from when I was growing up. It went, hello. It's about the sounds of silence. And when there is that darkness within you, always know that the flip side of that is light, and that behind the darkness is the light. Behind the light is the darkness too. Like every light has a shadow. They will always follow each other. And the greater the light is, the greater shall be the shadow. The greater will be the darkness that's why you see people who become very elevated spiritually are also very prone to be attacked by that darkness. You'll find great gurus and great teachers suddenly ending up doing crazy things, either in terms of greed or in terms of becoming involved in sexual affairs or taking part in all kinds of things that are actually not okay, because that darkness descends upon them. Where there is great light, there will also be great darkness. It doesn't have to be. If you are on guard, if you realize that we are all fallible, if you stay in a place of humility, if you don't let either success or acknowledgement or people's regard for you get to your head, if you don't let it sway you into a place of grandiosity and thinking yourself to be infallible, if you stay in a place of humility, you will be safe. Always. No matter how much you have materially, no matter how recognized you are, no matter how praised you are, how loved you are, you will stay always safe. Always stay in a place of humility. It's like being grounded. When you're on the ground, it's very hard to fall. When you're climbing up on something, it's much easier to fall. The higher they get, the harder they fall. Right? That's the saying. Does anyone have a question before I proceed? Anyone have any thoughts? Anything you want to share? continue. Krishna continues, that determination. Now see, to get anywhere, it takes determination, right? It really takes that. It takes a tremendous focus to get somewhere. Whether you're trying to get to a place, whether you're trying to achieve something in your life, whether you're trying to, because material reality is dense, and to penetrate material reality is a huge task. It's not easy. Spiritual reality is very easy. It's very light. Everything is achievable instantly. So you want to use that spiritual reality to penetrate material reality. And it requires one thing, it requires focus. Focus is being able to focus your attention, focus your mind. This is what you do in meditation as well. Through the power of meditation, of focus, dhyan, you can attain even God. What to say of anything else in this world? So now Krishna explains, what is that kind of focus? What is that kind of determination that you need? Determination in the mode of goodness. He explains it here. That determination which is unbreakable means no matter what obstacle comes your way, you're not going to waver. You are not going to step down. You are not going to give up. That determination which is unbreakable, which is sustained with steadfastness. Steadfast. When you're out to achieve something in this world, where you're out to achieve anything in your spiritual practice, when you're out to achieve anything in being able to deal with your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, or your health, there needs to be steadfastness. Sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, and thus controls the mind, life, and the acts of the senses, is in the mode of goodness. That determination, which is unbreakable, which is sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, and thus controls the mind, life, and the acts of the senses, is in the mode of goodness. Let me explain this to you. And I think the key word to really pick up here is steadfastness by yoga practice. Yoga practice actually trains you in being able to be focused and be determined. It's a training in that. It's not about the poses of a yoga practice. It's not about sitting and chanting a mantra a certain way. It's not about how you sit. It's not about the physicality or the externality of it. It's not about trying to, dress the right way in your in your Lululemons or in your any other kind of outfit. Or it's not about shaving your head, and it's not about it's not about the show. Yoga practice is about training the mind in being steadfast. The mind is steady, does not wander, does not go from here to there. If I am speaking to you now, then all that exists is this moment, this experience, this act which is being done. There is no other thing. The past does not exist. The future does not exist. And in truth, even as I speak to you right now, the past would like to come in. The future would like to come in. But they are kept at bay. They are not allowed in right now. In this moment, this is sacred. Right here, right now. In other words, everything you do, there needs to be that training. That whatever I do it with full 100% devotion, dedication, commitment to that thing. You are 100% in it. If you are talking to someone, you are 100% there. If you are cooking, you are 100% there. You are steadfast. You are not wavering while you're cooking. You're thinking of something else. Because if you're doing that, then the food's going to get burnt. Right? It's not going to come out okay. But if your consciousness is truly in it, and if you are during that time, let's say, chanting some mantras, singing some love songs, creating magic within that which you are cooking or doing or creating, then you will find the results will be phenomenal. Because of your dhyan, your focus, your full attention, your steadfastness. So that's why he says, when the words used are unbreakable, steadfastness, by yoga practice that controls the mind, life, and the acts of the senses. See, when you've trained your senses, when you've trained your mind, when you've trained your whole being to be focused, that kind of determination that will arise from there is phenomenal. Then it will move heaven and earth. Then it will make the entire universe. It's not about just sitting and wishful thinking, like people want to manifest things. They want to manifest great riches, or they want to manifest, whatever law of attraction stuff that they talk about. They're not able to do that. The majority of people who believe those things are not able to do that. They're actually quite broke. They're actually not successful. There's a few people who are, and those few people who were able to do it, and who are the ones who are teaching all that stuff, it is because they followed these principles that Krishna is talking about. Because they were focused, because they were determined, because they would not accept any other possibility. This is the bottom line. When you will accept no other possibility but that which you are aiming for. And I say to you this, if you could have anything, then why not have everything? By everything, I mean the source of everything. By that I mean God. Right? You cannot have everything of the world. Nobody ever did. No matter how great the conqueror, no matter how rich the person, they never had everything in the world. Everything can never belong to you. But everything does belong to God. And when you have God in your life, then there is a sense of completion. In a sense that I know I have everything and I need nothing. And it's still good to enjoy the things that are there, but it's not from a place of need. It's not from a place of lack. It's not from a place of fear. So why not have, if you can have anything, why not have everything? Have that which is the source of everything, and you will have the entire world in your hand. You will not suffer from lack or need at any time when you have God in your life. That is my experience, and I know it works. Otherwise, it's like a tree. You can try to water all the leaves and branches of the tree, and some of the water will fall to the roots and it will water the plant. But the best way is find the root of the plant and water that. Find the root of all existence and cultivate that. And the root of all existence is the divine or God. And as you cultivate your relationship there, you will find the tree of your life blossoms and grows beautifully. Krishna continues with the topic of determination, saying, and that determination by which one holds fast to the fruits of one's labor, in other words, attachment to what it is you want and don't want, economic development and sense gratification, is in the mode of passion. And that determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, and illusion, such unintelligent determination is in the mode of darkness. Yeah. The American dream, such an interesting concept. I know that people who've they talk of how they had a dream and then that dream happened. It didn't happen because they had a dream. It happened because they had a dream, or like a dream is like a thought, right? And then they took that dream, they took that thought, and they persevered and they penetrated the veil of reality till they reached the other end of that, to the fulfillment of that dream or desire or that insight. Or I think in many cases, if you look at, for example, Martin Luther King saying, I have a dream, it was an insight of a better world. And when he persevered with that, it came to fruition. Not fully, but to a great extent. And even the idea of the American dream, yes, there are people who have persevered with their dream of wealth or whatever it might be, and they have achieved that. For most people, a dream is just a dream is just a dream, and they will keep on dreaming and get nowhere, right? Because they don't know how to take that and turn it into action. Add to that a high level of determination and focus and perseverance, without which dreams are just dreams. They're just lovely little bubbles of illusion, and they go nowhere, and they leave you feeling frustrated and unhappy. In that case, better you don't dream. But if you're going to dream, and if you really want your dreams to happen, then learn from Krishna about determination here and what it takes to actualize a dream. Okay, I think what I'm going to do for this week is I'm going to end up over here. I'd like to know if there's any questions, and then we'll take up the next. The next part has to do with happiness, and I'd like to give that, rather than take it up at the end here where we're just winding up. I want to take it up next week when we have more time to discuss different kinds of happiness. So it's a lovely topic that's coming up, and I hope that you'll all be there. But for today, let's see if there's any questions, if there's any things you'd like to clear up, or things you'd like to add to what I've been sharing here. Anyone?
Rohit, I just wanted to know, this Brahmanad is similar to the white noise. I have no idea about either, but just for out of
Nad
curiosity.
Brahma, which I referred to,
Yeah.
Nad Brahma is considered the sound that arises from silence. So white noise, no. I mean, I don't know what exactly you're referring to when you say white noise. White noise is something like, you put on the, like if you have a TV set of the old times and you have it on in the background and it's sort of like, shh. No.
Okay.
It's this deep inner silence wherein you're able to hear the voice of God, your Paramatma, the Super Soul, the soul within or within of yourself. You're able to hear that. We all have the ability to hear that. Don't let anyone, or especially your mind, fool you otherwise. Right? We have the ability to hear that. And the simple way is this, that if you will take your thoughts and not let them captivate you. So your thoughts will come to you, and if you agree or disagree with your thoughts, they will captivate you. Or if you are intrigued by them and you want to know more about them and you're curious about your thoughts, then again they will captivate you. That is why they tell you in meditation to observe. To observe means to step back, to neither agree nor disagree, or like or dislike any given thought, to not hold on to it, to not try to make anything out of it, to not even try to understand it, to simply know it's a thought, and to let it go.
Okay.
So when you don't
So
hold
Brahmanad is the silence, or the words that we hear, internal soft
First,
words.
it is not Brahmanad, it is Nad Brahma, the sound
Nad Brahma.
that arises from the Brahman. Right?
Okay.
So in the Bible it says, in the beginning was the Word. Right? And the Word
Okay.
was God. So in the same way, we know that in the beginning of creation, Brahma sits in meditation and then he hears the Nad Brahma. The Nad Brahma is a sound that arises from that silence. Initially, he hears the flute of Krishna, and then he hears the word Om.
Yeah.
The same idea is there. And the same thing can occur in your life when you take the moment to be still and to be silent and to let your thoughts clear, your head clear out. And then from that clarity will arise exactly what needs to happen or not, or what you need to do or not do in that moment of your life. That making any sense? Or
Yeah. Matlab, it is those soft words. I was thinking it's some kind of particular noise. No, it is not a
no?
voice. It is those soft words which you hear.
Yes.
Obviously, the solution to. Okay, that is okay.
Exactly.
ठीक है.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right.
Thank
All right. Any other thoughts or ideas before we wind up? Great questions, by the way. Thank you all. Vibha, Neha, Craig, thank you all so much for all the different inputs. If there's anyone else who has a question or a thought before we wind up, just let me know. All right, good. So yeah, keep practicing that. Keep practicing being silent and listening to that those silent words, those quiet words that arise. They seem so unimportant that your mind brushes them aside. Pay attention. The more you pay attention, the more you write it down, the more you honor those words, the more you will find they will come to you. All right, guys, I will see you next week. I'll be back in the US by then and look forward to continuing our conversations. Take care. Jai Shri Krishna. We're now getting ready.
Bye.
Bye.